Hello, I'm back. Back again this evening. Happy Monday. Hey again, Liz. Hey, Rachel. I feel like I was just talking to you. Hope you're having a good workout. Hey, Sarah. All right. It's going to be short and sweet tonight. I want to just make these videos simple, easy to understand. And again, maybe this is something you already are familiar with. Maybe you need a refresher on some of this information. But there's a lot out there. So I like to do just simple, short videos that hopefully help you out. If you're watching me now, thank you for tuning in. Hey, Kathleen. Hey, Nancy. And if you're watching later, just comment below that you watched the replay. And tonight we're going to be going over macros. So it's a buzzword. If you haven't heard of it, or maybe you have heard the term, maybe you've never really practiced or tracked macros before. So that's what I was going to go through a little bit tonight, as far as, what are they and why is it important to track them if you are trying to lose weight or lose fat, or even just to feel better. Sometimes it's helpful to see what exactly you're taking in and what percentages you're coming in with some of your foods. So I'll just go ahead and get started real quick. Basically, what are macros? We've all heard of calories. That's basically a unit of energy when it comes to our food. And if you go even further down a layer into that, we're going to break your foods into three categories, basically. Our macronutrients. These are our larger nutrients that our body needs and what your foods are made up of. So you've got your proteins, carbs, and fats. Proteins are usually the one macronutrient that I am enforcing the most with my clients, especially women. We're just not typically eating enough of it, and it's a challenge. But protein is super important for muscle building. Essentially, that's the main function for protein when you're eating it. But also staying fuller longer. And just to kind of give you some numbers here, when you have a gram of protein, that equals 4 calories. And then same with carbohydrates. 1 gram of carb equals 4 calories. And also with fats, this is where it goes up a little bit. So you got to be a little bit careful when it comes to fats and overdoing it, because they have 9 calories per gram. So this is where, when you start to track food, let me just back up a little bit. If you've never tracked your food, there are lots of apps out there that you can jump on that they have a database right in them, and you plug in what you're eating. And it's helpful to do it, I would say for 7 straight days in a row, tracking, because include your weekends. If you're not including your weekends, you could be throwing things off a little bit, because we all know what happens on weekends. Um, Everything kind of goes out the window usually, and we are a little more lenient on the weekends and we indulge a little bit. So you have to factor in those into your kind of overall numbers. But kind of if you're looking at it from, should I just be counting or tracking my calories, or should I really be looking into my macros? I would say if you've never tracked your food before and this is all something new to you, start with your calories. Let's just see how much food you're actually eating throughout the day. Because it can be very overwhelming if you're starting to track your food and then you're like, okay, I can see how much calories I'm eating, but I can also see that 30% of it is coming from protein. So that's good, but I'm really high in carbs and I'm lower in fat. And then you just start to play all these games. So you don't know where you're supposed to fall, right? But if you just start with calories, and you can kind of see, if you're falling on the higher end or the lower end with calories, then when you start to get comfortable with calories, we'll start to look at your protein. This is kind of how the way that I do it with my clients is, let's just track your food. I want to see if you're kind of an under eater, or if you're going over. And then from there, where do your numbers fall with protein? So if you're somebody that's eating, let's say 10% of your diet is coming from protein, I'm not going to prescribe you 30% protein, because that's going to throw your system way off and do some things to your body that you're probably going to hate me for. So that kind of, you know, and then when you start to get a little bit deeper into macro tracking, it gets easier. And you can start to play around with your tracking app and punch things in. A trick for me, and actually one of my friends just told me she did this too, it's super helpful, is to go into your app and put some meals in for tomorrow. So, or, you know, you can just kind of put them in there and see where the numbers fall. Because let's say, just throwing numbers out there, let's say you're trying to reach 1,800 calories, 30% of that is coming from protein, and that's the number one macro that you're trying to really focus on. Just go in there and put, like, you know, start putting foods in and see how much protein is in these foods. And so 30% can be, you know, it can be overwhelming if you're somebody that's eating 10%. So you want to just pay attention to where you're currently falling before you start setting up your macros for yourself. It's kind of the number one thing I would suggest if you're going to be doing your own macros. And there's tons of calculators out there. You can find some online. They're totally free. You just plug in your information. Usually it asks for your gender, your height, your age, and your activity level. And those factors are going to kind of tell you, number one, where your calories, where your maintenance level calories are going to fall. And then if you're going to go into a deficit, kind of what that looks like. Or maybe you're going to try to go into a bulk and eat a little bit more. That's pretty rare with most of my clients. We don't do too much bulking, but I do reverse dieting, which you've probably seen a little bit of lately, and I'll go into that another time. But that's basically where we're trying to get people back up to maintenance level calories so that their body is now in a place where it's going to be okay to let go of fat. So then we start to go into a deficit after the metabolism likes where we're at with calories. So, little off tangent there, but you can kind of think of your overall calories as your bank account. So when you're making deposits and taking things out, that's kind of like your overall calories, but your macros are the debit cards. So you have 3 debit cards associated with your bank account. So if you're pulling a lot from carbohydrates, or putting a lot in for carbohydrates, I should say, it can kind of throw things off, and you're too low in your protein, that, you know, card is off. So just kind of an analogy to think about as far as like the hierarchy of calories, and then macros fall within those calories. And a lot of people get, you know, I do get that question, which is better, just tracking your calories or tracking your macros? And I say both once you're to that comfort level and you feel like you're ready to go ahead and track your macros. And there was a lot of controversy over the if it fits your macros kind of diet phase there was for a while. Macros to me isn't a diet, it's just a way of understanding what you're putting in your body. So I think of it more as a tool, macro tracking, and not like, oh, I do macros for my diet. Well, it's not like it's keto where we're following a certain rules. This is very flexible. You can put whatever you want into your, you know, your app and just see where numbers fall. So that's why I coach with macros. I find it to be much more realistic. There's no restriction, no, you know, sometimes obviously if you're being true to yourself, you can be honest and put everything in your app, and you can just learn from it. So obviously we know some of those higher calorie foods, higher fat foods that we shouldn't be eating, but they're okay once in a while. Just throw them in your app and see what happens, and then correct it the next time. Maybe you're just gonna have a little bit less of that and a little bit more protein with that meal. So it's, again, a great learning tool. It is something that I do warn people also with tracking, that if you're going to get obsessive about it, it's time to pull back a little bit. And there's other methods you can use to kind of help out with figuring out your macros. But generally, for most people, it's okay. If it is starting to become obsessive, we'll pull back from it and, you know, come up with some other ideas. And so I already went over the macro calculators. That kind of covers the whole macro thing. Hopefully that helped you out a little bit. Like I said, I'm gonna post tomorrow just a very general PDF document that shows all the benefits of protein, carbs, and fats, and gives you those numbers that I just talked about. So 4 calories for your proteins, 4 calories for a gram of carbs, and 9 for those fats. So that's where I heard this the other day on a podcast that said figuring out your macros can sometimes be like a game of Tetris. Some days you go to look at your app and you're like, oh man, I have like 40 grams of protein left to eat tonight. So that's just a learning tool. So I'm not going to expect you to eat 40 grams of protein that night if you can't get it in. But tomorrow, let's spread it out a little bit more. So I want you eating a little bit more eggs in the morning so that you don't have to get stuck with 40 grams of protein at night. And over time, you start to learn what your body needs because you start to feel better and you want to keep doing it. And that's the thing with tracking too, is eventually you're going to get yourself to a point where you can pull away from the tracking, not be so obsessive about the app, and become more intuitive into how you're feeling and knowing just what's on your plate. So I'm looking at my plate and I can see that there's a lot more protein over here. I've got a little bit of carb and a little bit of fat, and we're good to go. So you can kind of get yourself to that point once you're, reaching your goals and maintaining at that point. So I hope that helped. Again, I'm going to post that document tomorrow for you, just explaining those macros. And if you think of any questions related to this, post them down below. I'll try to answer as best I can. And I appreciate you joining me. And we'll do another one next Monday. I'll come up with a topic for you for next Monday and some other fun stuff as we go through the week. So thank you so much. Have a good night.